Hello, my name is Paula Deloff. I'm a teacher at Thomas Jefferson High School, and today we're going to take a look at the literary passage question that's part of the 30 CRC multiple choice questions on the TSI 2.0. And we're going to look at the passage, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Okay, hopefully if this is, hopefully you kind of have an idea of what these videos are about. You've maybe been using some of the resources in the Canvas classroom. So I want to talk a little bit about the literary passage and just give you a couple quick facts about it. First of all, it's always going to be an authentic passage. So whenever I come up with this type of question, if you look at some of the resources, you'll see that these are real writers that have written short stories. Or I have James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son. I have one based on that. I have one based on Old-Fashioned Girl by Louisa May Alcott and To Build a Fire by Jack London. Because I want the students to realize that these are actually things that are published by writers. And of course, one of the ones that I have is the one that we're looking at today, which is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. There's going to be 4 questions attached to it. I actually have 5 questions. You get a bonus question today. There's only going to be 1 literary passage on the CRC part. Now, if they get the diagnostic, they're going to get more. They might get a couple literary passages on the diagnostic. It's the only reading on the test that's not informational. So if you look at the short passage and the connecting selections, you're always going to see that it sounds like an article or a textbook or something along those lines. This one sounds like a story. Even if it's, like Notes of a Native Son, which is a book of essays, it's going to sound like literary nonfiction, even if it isn't fiction. So the way that it appears, like logistically, is, unfortunately, the way that I have it on Canvas, it doesn't present exactly this way, but you get the short passage and the short passage, or they get the literary passage, and the literary passage and the question is underneath that. What happens when they click submit on the question is the passage stays, fortunately, so they can continue to refer to it, but then the question changes. And I have it set up. I had to have it set up as a multiple drop down, so all the questions are there. And I just make sure the students know that they're not going to be able to pre-read the questions on the literary passage. They can pre-read the first one, but that's going to be it. They're only going to see 1 question at a time. And this is the first thing that they encounter on the CRC, so hopefully it'll be a positive experience for them, because then they go on to do 11 more reading questions, and then, of course, the 15 reading questions that come after that. But this is the first thing that they encounter. All right, so the question types. If you watched my other videos where I focused on the short passage and the different types of questions, because that's how I approach intervention, is by teaching students to understand the different types of questions they'll encounter, you'll see that you'll get the same types of questions on the reading portion, or the literary passage portion. So once the kids know how to deal with an inference question on the short passage part, they should know how to deal with it on the literary passage part. In theory, I know it doesn't always work out that way. We always say the kids should, and then they have their own ideas about what they should. But that's the thinking, is that if they understand the question types, they're just reading a different type of article. And the same things that they encounter on an inference question are going to be the same. There's going to be answers that come out of left field that they shouldn't pick. There's going to be answers that the text says the opposite. So the same question construction ideas come into play with a different kind of passage. So that's why I like to teach them how to handle different types of questions so they can encounter them on any type of passage. So I want to do this this passage, and I'm going to read it aloud. So if you're not really into that, you can just kind of fast forward to this part. But I'm going to read the passage aloud and go through the questions. This is obviously a more awkward type of question to deal with in a slideshow, because you can only fit so much with it still being readable. But there's 2 slides that have the passage. In the following passage is from the novel The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Here, a hitchhiker and a truck driver for the company Oklahoma City Transport Company are both leaving the diner at the same time when they meet in the parking lot. I always encourage them to make sure that they read that. The hitchhiker stood up and looked across through the windows. "Could you give me a lift, mister?" The driver looked quickly back at the restaurant for a second. "Didn't you see the no rider sticker on the windshield?" "Sure, I've seen it. But sometimes a guy will be a good guy, even if some rich bastard makes him carry a sticker." The driver, getting slowly into the truck, considered the parts of this answer. If he refused now, not only was he not a good guy, but he was forced to carry a sticker, was not allowed to have company. If he took in the hitchhiker, he was automatically a good guy, and also he was not one whom any rich bastard could kick around. He knew that he was being trapped, but he couldn't see a way out, and he wanted to be a good guy. He glanced again at the restaurant. "Scrunch down on the running board till we get around the bend," he said. The hitchhiker flopped down out of sight and clung to the door handle. The motor roared up for a moment, the gears clicked in, and the great truck moved away. First gear, second gear, third gear, and then a high, whining pickup and fourth gear. Under the clinging man, the highway blurred dizzily by. It was a mile to the first turn in the road. Then the driver slowed down. The hitchhiker stood up, eased the door open, and slipped into the seat. The driver looked over at him, slitting his eyes, and he chewed as though thoughts and impressions were being sorted and arranged by his jaws before they were finally filed away in his brain. His eyes began at the new cap, moved down the new clothes to the new shoes. The hitchhiker squirmed his back against the seat in comfort, took off his cap, and swabbed his sweating forehead and chin with it. "Thanks, buddy," he said. "My dogs was pooped out." "New shoes," said the driver. His voice had the same quality of secrecy and insinuation his eyes had. "You oughtn't to take no walk in new shoes. Hot weather." The hitchhiker looked down at the dusty yellow shoes. "Didn't have no other shoes," he said. "Guy gotta wear 'em if he ain't got no others." The driver squinted judiciously ahead and built up the speed of the truck a little. "Going far?" "Uh-uh. I'd have walked her if my dogs wasn't pooped out." The questions of the driver had the tone of a subtle examination. He seemed to spread nets, to set traps with his questions. "Looking for a job?" he asked. "Nah, my old man got a place 40 acres. He's a cropper, but we've been there a long time." Okay, so that is the passage. You can see that each sentence is numbered, that for easy reference. And let's look at the questions you might see on that. In sentences 7 through 11, which of the following can be inferred about the driver? So we have a classic inference question. The difference, of course, because we're dealing with a much longer passage, is that they might be given like, the passage might, or the question might narrow the search of the student down to a certain section, and they might have them scrutinize it. So in that way, it's very similar to a short passage because they're being asked to infer about a short passage. So this is something that, in theory, they already know how to do based on the intervention we've done with them in the short passage. So let's take a look at that. So you have that passage reprinted. And then you can go through with the students and you can do the elimination strategies if that's what you like to do. You can reread that passage with them. You can reread it and say, does any answer stick out as correct? Again, if you're doing this intervention through Zoom, you can have them change their response to direct message and guess at the answer. And if they're wrong, you can tell them to reconsider. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach this. I didn't put the arrow for the right answer, but I will before I post the slideshow in the Canvas class. The correct answer to this is the second choice. And it's very easy to, if you reread it, to see like, yeah, he wants to be seen as a good guy. He doesn't want to be seen as the sort of company, like as sort of the shill for the rich bastard. So he's like concerned about how this random hitchhiker views him. Because if he wasn't, he'd just be like, hit the road and not give him a ride. But sentence 11 kind of says it all. He wanted to be a good guy, so he cares what this dude thinks about him. The other answers can be, systematically ruled out because there's not enough information in the text to even arrive at that as an inference. So, if you whether you use the materials I've left for you, decide to plan your own, I would include one that has them look at a passage like that and remind them that this is what you're having them do on the short passage. It's just a short passage within a longer passage. The next question is a classic. So questions 2 and 3 are going to test the same section, and they're going to be pretty similar. One is written as a vocab question. One is written as an attitude question. Which of the following best defines how insinuation is used in sentence 26? So if you wanted to practice a vocabulary question with them, you could. And then I would point them out to especially the word secrecy. And I think there's another passage that you could point them to. Just the fact that he also, just throughout the whole thing, he seems very suspicious, or he seems like he's kind of accusing him. So an insinuation is kind of an accusation. Again, if they know what an insinuation is, they're probably going to get the right answer. If they don't, then they're going to have to look at their context clues. So I might point them to these two sections. So a third question, which is very similar, I probably wouldn't put both questions 2 and 3. I can't remember which ones I settled on for the Canvas course, but I would probably choose between these two questions because they kind of ask the same thing. Or you could put them both in there to show them, how the question might look different. That would be a good idea. And so I always have to make sure they never know what indifferent means. But using the same passages from the previous slide, he's suspicious of this person. He's like looking at his new clothes and he's like, what's this dude all about? He's setting, like they say, he's setting traps spreading traps, setting nets with his questions, something like that. I have to look at the passage to get the wording right. He's suspicious. And if you actually read the book, and if you know, he has all these new clothes on in the middle of the Great Depression, and that kind of sets off, and this is probably more context knowledge than the kids will have, but he sees that this person has new clothes. There was the Great Depression, and the reason the guy has new clothes is he just got out of prison. So this is one of the reasons why the driver is likely a little suspicious of him. The kid, but I don't think you have to have that ingrained knowledge of the text to get to suspicious. I think you just have to look at the kinds of, like, the same passages, let me go back. The same passages that we looked at here, if you decided to go with this question instead, you would use the same passages to arrive at that question. Okay, let me go to question 4. What can be concluded from the passage? Okay, these are of course, I think, a harder question because you're not able to sort of focus the students on a smaller passage, but you could very well get one of these on the literary passage that asks them to think about the passage and that doesn't really help them to focus on a certain part. And if this was the case, one of the things that I might do is start with elimination so they can get rid of the wrong ones. But I will tell you that, a lot of students like A as a choice because they think hitchhikers, they might have this personal bias or prejudice, but actually the answer is much simpler than that. This is the last 2 sentences in the passage. No, he asks them if he's looking for a job, and he says, no, my old man got a place, 40 acres, he's a cropper. So that, to me, I can conclude from that that's where he's going, right? He's heading towards his farm, and of course, if you know anything about the book, when he gets there that the family's about to leave for California. I can't recommend this book highly enough. I didn't read it till I was like maybe a couple years ago, and it's just an amazing book. And then the 5th question is very much an author's craft, like what effect do these sentences have on the passage? So what does including these passage help to examine or help to do which of the following? And so I'll put those again. And this goes back to this fact that the driver is really the point of this scene is the driver is really interrogating the hitchhiker, trying to figure out what he's going on. And you get the tone of subtle examination. He seemed to spread nets, set traps with questions. So the one that fits the best with this is this choice. And once again, I'm sorry I didn't put the arrows in to point to the right answer, but the right answer is this first one. The rest of them can just be ruled out, and this would be a good question to show them how to rule out and eliminate choices. The rest of them just really don't make any sense if you look at what's actually said in those sentences. All right, so that's it for this one. I know it's a little bit of a quicker video, thank goodness, but it does help to show how those same types of questions that we talked about in the last set of videos really does show in the literary passage. So if you can kind of give those kids that commonality, they won't see the literary passage as something that's so much harder than the rest of the test. Thank you so much for tuning in, and if you have any questions, here is my contact. Oh, here I am. I didn't put my email address. That's super unhelpful. But my email address is pdoloff1. That's me, pdoloff1. So 2 L's, 2 F's in my last name, and I'm the only P. Dolliff in SAISD, so I'm P. Dolliff1. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope you have a wonderful day.